Let me put on my glasses because this is going to be a nerdy video. I think I broke these. They do not look even at all. I'm going to hell.
Yeah, buddy. Lightweight, baby!
What's up, guys? I'm Josh and I Lift Things, and I'm here to talk about stretching before a workout. Is it that bad? Too long didn't watch. Stretching probably doesn't prevent injuries, but doing it before your workout really isn't going to hurt you. You hear this all the time. Do dynamic stretches before your workout, static stretches after. Stretching before lifting kills all gains. First off, let me explain the difference between a dynamic stretch and a static stretch. Dynamic stretches are stretches where you are dynamic, which just means moving. Think of something like an arm circle. They're typically used for enhancing mobility or for getting blood flowing to a joint. Static stretches are stretches where you hold one position for a prolonged period of time. You are static, unmoving. Imagine like when you're training for the splits. These are typically used for enhancing flexibility. So the question remains, why is dynamic stretching good for a warm-up while static stretching is bad? Well, dynamic stretches are good for a couple different reasons. For instance, if you have problems hitting squat depth, doing some bodyweight squats beforehand or some hip mobility drills can help you reach depth during your workout. It's probably not going to do anything to actively increase your range of motion over a long period of time unless you do them religiously, but it will help for a momentary increase in range of motion, which can be useful for performing the workouts that day that you need to do. These movements can help alleviate soreness, even if it's for a transient amount of time. They get blood pumping and are useful for just general problem areas. They can also help ingrain proper movement patterns depending on how seriously you take them. But these last couple points pretty much apply to any warm-up modality. So why does that make static stretching bad for a warm-up? You'd think that a static stretch could do very much the same things as a dynamic warm-up. Hell, you'd probably even assume that they're useful for preventing injuries. This is where you're wrong. Virtually any meta-analysis on the subject has proven otherwise. Here we have the impact of stretching on sports injury risk, a systematic review of the literature. This is a pretty good one. You can see that studies were excluded that lacked controls. Studies did not include subjects in sporting or fitness activities. 6 of 361 identified articles compared stretching with other methods to prevent injury. Data was abstracted by one author, then reviewed independently by 3 others. And what the results came to be was that stretching was not significantly associated with a reduction in total injuries, and similar findings were seen in the subgroup analysis. Conclusion: there is not sufficient evidence to endorse or discontinue routine stretching before or after exercise to prevent injury among competitive or recreational athletes. Further research, especially well-conducted randomized controlled trials, is urgently needed to determine the proper role of stretching in sports. Basically, what this is saying is that stretching does not increase rates of injury, and it does not decrease rates of injury. If we move on to this study here, the effects of stretching on one sport injury risk, a review, shout out Lawrence Hart. If we come here to the main results, reduction in total injuries, shin splints, tibial stress reactions, sprains/strains, and lower extremity and limb injuries with either stretching or specific leg muscle groups or multiple muscle groups was not found in 5 controlled studies. Reduction in injuries was not significantly greater for stretching of specific muscles or multiple muscle groups. After adjustment for co-founders, low-quality studies did not show a greater reduction for injuries with stretching compared with high-quality studies. Stretching to improve flexibility, adverse effects of stretching, and effects of warm-up were not assessed by appropriate intervention studies. So again, once more, they're just making the statement that stretching probably doesn't help with injury prevention all that much. Granted, some of the injuries that they are referencing aren't really necessarily related to muscles and their flexibility in the first place, but I think it's still worth recognizing. And finally, this study here, a randomized trial of pre-exercise stretching for prevention of lower limb injury. We got the Pope writing this one. Hell yeah. I'm going to hell. Results: 33 lower limb injuries were recorded during the training period, including 214 soft tissue injuries. Here's the more important stuff: soft tissue. There were 158 injuries in the stretch group and 175 in control. There was no significant effect of pre-exercise stretching on all injuries, soft tissue injuries, or bone injury. Fitness, age, and enlistment date all significantly predicted injury risk, but height, weight, and body mass index did not. This is very interesting, and it's a pretty large study. It was based on 1,538 male Army recruits. But it's important to be said that the stretch was only performed for 20 seconds, so this throws some variables or co-founders into the equation. I can't speak, dude. So it seems that stretching does not reduce injury, at least in sports. Weightlifting is an entirely different story, primarily because there's very little impact and you're working in like a fixed plane of motion. Now, for the rest of this, I'm going to be heavily leaning on 2 articles, both of which literally reference 100 plus papers. They will be linked in the description, so if you want to check them out, I recommend doing so. The first one's going to be a little bit easier to digest for someone that is kind of a layman, while the second one goes into much more depth. But it turns out stretching before a workout may result in less performance. At least that's what people often think. Humans have always stretch before intense exercise. But in the 90s and the the 2000s, in the Zoomer period, the literature started to build up that stretching before activity was actively lowering performance. These studies have shown pretty reliably that a stretch of 60 seconds or more, oftentimes the studies use 120 seconds or 2 minutes, can lower strength by about 5%, especially done immediately before an exercise. Even the American College of Sports Medicine says that static stretching does not have to be included into an adequate warm-up. But after more research was done, it turns out that static stretches up to 60 seconds probably do not impact performance whatsoever. From the first article I mentioned, we can see here that Palmer et al. Conducted a randomized crossover repeated measure study designed in young healthy female participants that examined the acute effects of different stretching durations, 30, 60, 120 seconds. These authors observed significant declines in muscle power 120 seconds, but not after 30 and 60. More stuff here by Caldwell showed that 120 seconds resulted in a very big drop-off in total contractile strength. K and Blazevich examined 106 STS studies and demonstrated that greater than 60 seconds of stretching per muscle group resulted in an average performance decline of 7.5%. However, the same authors demonstrated that stretching for less than 45 seconds can be used during warm-up routines without any significant risk of harmful effects on strength and power performances. Here, BEM identified 125 studies. They demonstrated that greater than 60% of stretching substantially inhibits strength and power measures by about 4.6%. Delta, triangle, learn your Greeks. Alternatively, stretching for less than 60 seconds is proved to be less harmful. Delta, 1.1%. Overall, the negative acute effects of static stretching has to be interpreted from a dose-response perspective. In other words, stretching conducted over short durations, less than 60 seconds per muscle group, can be recommended, while long duration, greater than 60 seconds per muscle group, has negative effects on strength and power. Also, it has to be said that a lot of these tests also compared dynamic stretching or did dynamic stretching in tandem with static stretching, which potentially, throws a little bit of a wrench into things. There's also ballistic stretching and PNF stretching, which is an entirely different can of worms that I probably have to make an entirely different video or script talking about, but there's something else that has to be said here. We've talked before about how antioxidants around a workout time can actually blunt the training response. I have a future video coming up talking about cold showers or cold immersion and how, again, they can also blunt the training response. But if they help someone recover or feel better enough to go into a lifting session, then they are useful regardless if they actually hurt the results you get from lifting that day. If you couldn't go at all, but then you did a cold shower and that made you feel good enough to get a workout in, well, then it's very beneficial. Even if it's diminished number greater than 0. The same could be said for stretching. If you feel like you have to, or there's some placebo in you that makes it feel like when you stretch, you can then perform better, even if the numbers show you perform less, the mindset of it alone could be a big enough benefit to say that it's useful for you in the first place. We know that stretches of less than 120 seconds or even 60 seconds still increase range of motion. There's some studies that show it may even improve strength. Some people still think that it could reduce musculotendinous injuries, but again, this could be from a myriad of factors on why stretching even works in the first place. It could be some type of neural adaptation, it could be blood flow, it could be anything in between. I've said it before and I'll say it again, humans are confusing. So people think that stretching is bad because a lot of the earlier work has been done on extremely long stretching followed by immediate exercise. This isn't really indicative of how people actually train. Most of you, when you perform a static stretch, it's probably for what, 15, 30 seconds? And tell me, do you go immediately from a chest wall stretch to a bench press? Probably not. Most people would do a little bit of stretching. They probably do a little bit of dynamic work, maybe some foam rolling or some light cardio, and then they would do warm-up sets on their first lift of the day, and then they would train. Meaning there's going to be anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes in between your last stretch, which probably wasn't that intense, and the first weight you actually lift that day. So are you the type of person that likes to stretch a little bit before a workout because it will help increase the range of motion you can reach, which will in turn increase total hypertrophy? If so, keep stretching. Don't let people fear-monger you out of it or just repeat stupid parroted claims that stretching kills all gains. Just, at least as far as following the science goes, try to keep it for less than 60 seconds per muscle group and don't jump into a lift immediately after performing the stretch. If you would like some recommendations for warm-up routines that include both static and dynamic stretching as well as myofascial release, I can highly recommend the 3 made by Joe DeFranco: Simple 6, Agile 8, and the Limber 11. They will all be linked below in the description. And guys, that's the video. If you like this style of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. If you want to help even more, leave a comment down below. Even if it's just telling me why I'm a idiot, it really helps out, and I respond to every single one of them. If you really like this style of content, you can follow all of these socials where I post mobile clips twice a day, every single day. YouTube Glitch channel, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. I have a subreddit you can join. I have a Discord you can join. All of that really helps out. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.